It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And it's time to have some fun because Camp Dynasty's draft season has officially begun, and we're kicking it off with our second mock draft of the year, but kind of the first real one.
Yeah, the first one is like you just kind of get your ideas out there, and it's like, yeah, Keon Coleman's my wide receiver 1. He's my number 2 overall player, and you just kind of let that get out in the air. This one is like more informed. You wrap the bow on the college football season. We got Heisman finalists just announced. It's just that kind of time of year. I did my first like NFL mock draft on the PFF simulator. It's starting to feel it. It's the Christmas season, maybe a little bit, but it's really draft season starting.
Amen. I mean, it's here. I'm feeling it. The draft declares are continuing to pour in. We have some new ones. Most notably, this one, Ollie Gordon. We were kind of, based on how the season went, It was like, will he stay or will he go? And he's going into the draft. So Ollie Gordon officially declares. Other notable names, we got some IDPs. Nick Scorton officially declares from the D-line edge group. And then I think Mason Taylor is the only other skill guy that we were not aware of, which, I mean, I've seen some Mason Taylor. When you watch LSU for the last 3 years, you see the big white tight end, but I don't really know where he fits into this class. But we're just excited to have new names in the 2025 NFL draft.
Yeah, you hope that they keep rolling in because, like, I've said this many times, but you don't want to be in the position where you feel like you're kind of like hung out to dry in your draft because you expect there to be this many good to elite players in the class, and then, 1 or 2 of them end up going back to school, and it's like, oh, the class looks a little more shaky than it did yesterday. So you just hope that all these names continue to roll in and the class looks as strong today as it does on draft day.
And we will continue to keep a close eye on things. They're going to keep coming in fast. But the college playoff, I mean, that also throws a wrinkle in things because now you're going to have players that want to play in all of these games. Like, they're not just going to sit out the playoff. So,
yeah.
And also shout out SMU for making it, because if Bama had gotten in, I would have been very upset. But
yeah, the Bama discourse of like, I can't believe you guys are leaving Bama. It's like, we're going off pure resume now. Like, we're going off of the who won games. There's 12 teams. Like, you should be happy you're even considered.
Like, I get it, man. I want to watch Jalen Milroe on the playoff stage too, but don't lose to Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Don't lose to Tennessee then. I mean,
Seriously.
I don't know what you want, but all right. So 2025 Dynasty Rookie Mock, the first one that is informed by a season's worth, the final season, theoretically, for these players. When we do it in the summer, it's all projection and, based off of the 2023 film, what did we see? Now we kind of have a better idea. That being said, it is still important to put this into context that coming out of this mock draft, we will be starting Rankings 2.0. If you are new to Camp Dynasty and don't understand how this works yet, we are going to come out of this season. We're going to do a mock to get ourselves fired up and get everybody fired up. And then we're going to dive straight into the film from 2024 and get very involved with each and every one of these players, better understand their 2024 seasons and how it related to their 2023 seasons. And then ultimately we will come out of Rankings 2.0 with a very clear understanding of this draft class leading up to the Senior Bowl and the Combine and all of that. So that's just kind of the lay of the land so that everybody understands, like, we know these players well, but we're about to know them a lot better.
Yeah, we see you guys searching 2025 rookie mock draft. We know that's, the big picture, what we're here for as you prepare for draft season. And, you start potentially missing the playoffs, or maybe you're holding on to the pick of someone who missed the playoffs, and you're like, where is that ending up? And what does that mean for me? What guys do I need to go watch their film or their highlights to get myself hyped for my dynasty draft? That's what this is for. The future, where the next couple weeks, that's for if you are looking for a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end, et cetera, and you want to dig deep on those guys and see exactly, nail the player down where you like his traits, you like what he does on the field and where he's going to end up. That's the more specific stuff. But this is more the rah-rah. Let's go.
Yeah. Let's just kick back and have a little bit of fun, because we've been waiting for 3 months to do this again. So let's fire it up. We are going to do a live flip of the coin. I've already lost my coin somehow.
You just had it.
I literally was just playing with it. I'm going to flip my...
I have a coin right here.
Okay. I was going to flip my JJ Watt medallion.
I think that's what we did last time.
Yeah.
So this is the coin. I don't know if it's going to come into focus. This is I don't know what China's currency is, but it's 1 cent of that. I found this in a jacket pocket. So this is heads. It has a head on it.
Okay. I trust you.
And then the other side has a 1 on it. So you want heads, or
I'll
let you call it in the air.
Okay. Heads.
It's a tail.
Even the Chinese coin, I can't win. All right. Well, so you get the first pick then, sir.
I mean, there's not going to be a whole lot of pomp and circumstance for this. I think we've all been expecting Ashton Jeanty to come off the board 101 here. And he will. Jeanty has had, one of the best seasons from a college running back in quite a long time. We came into the season with tempered expectations for Jeanty. Remember saying on like a hot takes episode that Jeanty will end up top 5, and we were both like, "Ooh, that's kind of that's really spicy." Well, now he's just assumed to be a number 1 pick, and I mean, there's a reason for that. 2,500 yards on the ground, 29 touchdowns, 2 fumbles on 7.2 a carry. You've heard the story of Jeanty all season. If you've been locked into draft coverage, if you've been on this show, like we've been talking about Ashton Jeanty the entire season. The last question for this is like, well, I guess what does the playoffs look like for him? I don't know if there's like a ton that he can do to dissuade people, but where does he get drafted is the other question, because we know how much situation matters for running backs. We know what that can do to boost or suppress value. But Jeanty, I feel like, is as sure a bet as anybody in this class to, exceed expectations regardless of where he ends up landing. So 101, pin it, save it, and turn it in whenever you can.
Yeah. At one point this season, we were saying like, man, I don't think this is going to be the kind of class that there's a locked and loaded number 1 like we've had for the last 2 years with Bijan and Marvin. And it took a little longer to get there this year, but we eventually got there. And I don't think, I wouldn't anticipate that this is going to change. I wouldn't say it's necessarily as like sharpied maybe, because I think there is a world where, the NFL draft maybe doesn't go the same way that it went for like Bijan, for instance. Like maybe he doesn't go top 10, and that opens the door for like Travis Hunter or one of the other receivers to get in the mix. But I still think that's very surprising, and the interest or not very likely. And the other interesting part about this is that this conversation is happening before the playoff, like you mentioned. And I think there is a pretty significant opportunity for Jeanty in the playoff, because most of his detractors are people who were like me before this season began, which was I'm seeing him doing this against the Mountain West. I want to see him do it against the best of the best. And as far as I'm concerned, I saw that this year. Like,
Yep.
I saw him up his game against the Mountain West, become one of the greatest college running backs of all time, and also do it earlier in the season against Oregon, a quality opponent, the number 1 team in the country. I mean, you saw him do it against that team. So I don't really have any reservations, but I still continue to see people talk about that. This can put it all to rest. I mean, Boise State is in, like, they got a first round bye in the playoff, like on the back of this player. Yeah. Now let's see him do it in the playoff. Let's see him give Boise State a chance to maybe even, make some noise, advance, and get, kind of deep into this thing. So I think as you've put it before, the myth making that can happen with the college football playoff and this player specifically is going to be one of the most fun stories to watch throughout the entire playoffs.
Yeah, I just remember the beginning of the season and talking about how Jeanty was unbelievable last year. And it's like, yeah, but nobody can tackle him. Like, what does that even mean? And then he goes and every single team on the schedule, nobody can tackle him, just week in and week out. And the almost like character that he's become in like the story of college football this year, of this guy is, and then on top of it, the Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty kind of battle for the Heisman has been so prevalent in the college football conversation. And so I think one Twitter user put it best when they were trying to make the case for Travis Hunter. It's like, if you take away all of Ashton Jeanty's big runs, he only averages 5.1 yards per carry. It's like, yeah, all right.
Good point,
yeah,
man.
Yeah, awesome. That's good. So for a guy who thrives on big runs, he can also get the dirty stuff done for you too.
I couldn't believe that. Like, You're really trying to say that by taking out his most explosive plays, he's still averaging over 5 yards a carry. Then you thought that was a negative.
Yeah. He'd still be top 10 in the NFL in yards per carry.
Oh, man. We'll create any narrative we need to knock down talents like this. But all right.
Mountain West.
So Jeanty goes 101. That is no surprise. Number 2. It's already getting interesting in this class because I think there are 2 players, in my opinion, that you can make an argument for today that could go number 2. I am going to take Tetairoa McMillan. The other player, of course, that I'm referring to is Travis Hunter. And I'm not, maybe you're not even going to take him at 3, but I think the allure with Hunter is the positions. That's not to say that he's not a great wide receiver prospect. Like, he is, and he's worthy of being this high, but he's not better than McMillan. So you're only taking Hunter over McMillan, in my opinion, if you are feeling like he can be a weapon that is playing both sides of the ball and potentially even a player that has DB eligibility. Like, there would have to be something like that to happen for me to take Hunter over McMillan. Yep. So without knowing that today, I'm going to just take Tetairoa McMillan because this was my number 1 player coming into the season, and not much has changed. I mean, the only thing that's changed is that Jeanty surged ahead and became an undeniable running back talent in this class. And that is, by itself at a premium, and especially with a talent like Jeanty. But McMillan, I mean, maybe he didn't have he didn't build on his sophomore season in terms of statistics, but man, that Arizona team regressed in a big way this year. I mean, this was one of the best teams in the country last season when McMillan had just shy of 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. This year, as a team that was, treading water at points this year, he still had over 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. So It was a different environment. He still managed to have an incredible season, one of the best seasons, for a wide receiver in college football this season. So I'm not, looking at this as like a what happened or a step backwards. I think the situation was just much different for him. And the player that you get with McMillan is, a projectable high end, fantasy weapon at wide receiver. Like one of these guys that is living at the X position for a team, that is getting funnel targets, that's catching everything that comes his way and catching a lot of touchdowns. He has that upside as the 6'5", 215, catch point monster that he is. So I think he is a player that would have been worthy of a number 1 overall selection in many draft classes. And this year you just happen to get him at number 2.
Yeah. McMillan, first of all, I'll put out there is the draft we're doing is 1 quarterback. We're half PPR. We're IDP. So you heard him mention Travis Hunter, DB, wide receiver eligibility. If you don't play IDP, you're like, who gives a shit if he's playing DB? Like, I don't care. So that's the frame we're coming into this with. But regardless, I still think McMillan is the safer bet because in my opinion, what you're going to get out of McMillan. You're going to get a freaky athlete that has great hands and can do a lot more after the catch than I thought he could coming into this year, because that was something that was huge in 2023 that I would have loved to see more. And then this year, it just seemed like they were either giving him more opportunities or maybe he was just better at it this year. But he seemed like he was making people miss more and more often on receptions this season. And then, like you said, the catch point stuff in the end zone. You need a guy that's going to score you touchdowns. You need a guy that's going to be a go-to player in the red zone. And while he is, 6'5", 212, which helps, it's also the ability that he shows to go up over people and hands catch those balls, where he's not waiting for him to come to him. He's high pointing those things. He's getting up over the top of DBs. He's using the height, the length, and the athleticism all together to, pull those down. And then, add those yak plays on top of the big, reminiscent of T. Higgins plays. You end up getting a pretty special player. Like you said, a guy that probably goes 1 in a lot of years that don't have this strong of running backs.
Look, I know more about McMillan than a lot of the players that we're going to talk about today, just because we watched his film from 2023. He was one of the best players unquestionably coming into this season. He still is today. I feel comfortable saying this before doing a deep dive on 2024. The T. Higgins comp gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Remember Quinshon Judkins getting T. Higgins comps? This is the T. Higgins comp.
Okay.
This is if you're going to throw the name T. Higgins out there, it better be for a player like this, because everything that you loved about T. Higgins coming out of Clemson, you're getting that with Tetairoa McMillan. And, there were doubts about Higgins' ability to separate. And I think that was also, something that was kind of, we were in a kind of transitional period, I feel like, with some of these guys. You saw what Higgins was doing at Clemson. He ends up going first pick of the second round because it's well, he's big and he can catch, but we've seen that a lot recently, and he's not separating well. But he was separating better than he was given credit for. And I think a similar narrative is going to pop up with McMillan again, because we've talked about him. He's not the best man coverage beater. He's not, but that's because he's 6'5", 215. You can't expect him to look like some of these guys do against man coverage, but he is, I would say, above average against man coverage. And when you're doing stuff at the catch point like he can, that is more than adequate. So you're going to get an early comp here for me, the McMillan T. Higgins comp. How do you feel about that?
I feel good mostly because of just the hands of Higgins and McMillan. You watch T. Higgins, and the thing that jumps out to you is, yes, the vertical downfield stuff. Yes, the jump ball stuff is all great. But every single catch, he's catching the ball like mid-flight away from his body. And it's the same thing with McMillan, where he's getting his hands out there and he's like arrogant with his hands because he knows you're not breaking it up. He knows this is my ball, whatever. It's the same trait that T. Higgins has, where he's getting it away from his body, and you'll see him like catch it and like hold it away from a DB while he's like getting pushed out of bounds. And McMillan, it's a similar idea where the guy is like going up and getting it, and he is using those mitts, and he is playing keep away with these DBs. So I don't have an official comp yet, but I definitely don't hate the T. Higgins one. I don't think we can give if we don't give a Tyler Lockett comp, a T. Higgins comp, and like a Deebo Samuel comp in a year, right, something's wrong.
Yeah. Every year you're going to get those players. But the thing is, you've never heard T. Higgins from me. I've never made a T. Higgins comp on this show. So
I think you're T. Higgins' biggest fan too.
I love T. Higgins. I loved him in that class and still love him to this day. And here's the next T. Higgins. So how do I get him?
Wow. Headline.
Yeah, write it. Tweet it.
The next T. Higgins. Hear all about it.
Put it on the thumbnail.
Yep.
All right. So that takes us to 103.
103. So you said that it gets interesting at 2. I agree, but not for the reason that you said, because I am curious about Travis Hunter, but I don't know. So I guess I'm not taking Travis Hunter here.
Okay.
I'll say that. And we can talk about why either now or probably when you take him with your next pick, if you're considering him at 2.
Yeah.
But I'm taking Omarion Hampton here. So Omarion Hampton, running back, UNC, had an incredible season. This was like one of 3 great running back seasons this year. And I've said this, from the start of the season till now, if Ashton Jeanty didn't exist, Omarion Hampton would be the running back of the class because of how good he was last year. He had 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns, and they gave him a heavier workload this year, and he handled it with 1660 and 15 touchdowns, same yards per carry. The guy is just an absolute workhorse machine. He looks the part. Finishes runs. He's, violent on contact and with his feet before contact. It's and then he started catching passes this year too. So kind of wrapped everything into a neat little bow that I wanted to see out of Omarion Hampton, and turned into this player that was like, oh man, I can't, let another player get Omarion Hampton before me. So I guess here I'm like, you get Ashton with your 101, and then it's like there's just certain players that you don't want to see succeed on other people's teams. And Omarion Hampton, I feel like, is going to be one of those guys, somebody that you championed last year and early this season, where you're like, man, Omarion, he's going to be the guy. And I threw out a Jonathan Taylor comp, and I don't know. We'll break it down when we get into running back rankings, but I don't feel too bad about that because, really good player.
When I had Hampton over Judkins and everybody else in the summer, that felt a little hot takey, but that you just go with it. It's summer. And Hampton is everything that I wanted him to be this year. I will say, if you look at his, pure number side again, he did improve, but he got more carries. So you mentioned same yards per carry, Same number of missed tackles forced at 67. Yards after contact per attempt, slightly higher. But like in a lot of ways, it was kind of the same season. But again, another player. Look at the situation. Going from Drake May to the starting quarterback gets hurt for the season in the first game. So you're playing with a backup quarterback. This team was not good this year. Mac Brown got fired. He's still able to put up numbers like this. And so to me, like, I'm not looking at this as, oh, he's, hitting a wall, he's plateauing. Like, no, he just had another amazing season in even worse circumstances this time around. So I think this was a year of growth for him. And especially like you mentioned in the pass catching game as well, career highs in receptions, yards. I mean, he is that, what you think of when you think of a fantasy weapon running back, he is that kind of player. He just so happens to be, like you said, in a class with Ashton Jeanty. So I can't blame you at all for taking him here at number 3. He's my number 4 player right now. So we're right next to each other here with this, just flip-flopping. But I'll be curious to find out what I see on his 2024 film that might even push him up the board, because we know how impactful and important these running backs can be.
Yeah, and he's like the pure runner also that people look for in these players, where it's like you can give this guy the ball on any down and distance and he can make a difference. So if you need a guy to be hard-nosed, you can have Omarion Hampton. If you need a guy that has, a little bit of sauce, you still got 28 in the backfield.
All right, 104. So I guess cat's out of the bag because I was already talking about it, but here's where I'm going to take Travis Hunter. So before I elaborate, why don't you tell me why you didn't take Hunter at number 3?
Yeah, so I guess I'm like, it's just the unknown surrounding Travis Hunter that makes me nervous to draft him this high, because it's like we don't know exactly what he's going to be doing. And until I have a clear vision of if he's going to be a corner or a wide receiver or both or, whatever, I don't know if I can be comfortable taking him top 5 in a draft class. Now, if he's playing all the snaps, which highly unlikely, then it's, you got to take him this high because he's going to compile stats because he's good at both positions. But if he's just playing DB with a sprinkler receiver, then it's like, okay, I'm drafting this guy number 3 that's going to have, 3 solo tackles and a PBU. And like, if he doesn't get a pick, he's going to have 8 points. It's like, okay, cool. That's fine. And then he's going to have the boom weeks where he catches a touchdown. So I don't know. I am concerned that the draft capital isn't going to reflect the performance based on what the snap split is looking like, offense to defense.
Well, so, I mean, today, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know. And so for me, I'm just choosing to say he's going to play receiver until I hear otherwise. Okay. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Because we've talked about the reasons why it makes sense for him to pursue wide receiver full-time, long-term, financially, why that is would be a good decision for him. But if he gets the feedback like, hey, NFL teams like you better as a corner, or maybe, hey, the team on top, 101, they want to take you, but they want you to play corner and maybe sprinkle wide receiver. Like, those are things that we will find out over the course of the next 6 months. And we've talked a lot about that, like how this is so unprecedented for not only, in Dynasty, but the NFL draft. I mean, we've never seen anything like this to even understand how this is going to go down. And the only thing we have so far is him saying, I'm playing both ways. So what does that mean? Like, do you think you're playing full time both ways? Because I would highly doubt that.
There's no way.
There's no chance. But I think he will be playing both ways in some capacity. Like, if he's playing full-time wide receiver, that's maybe murkier than if he's playing DB, then like it's very easy to imagine him coming in on offense every now and then. The other way around is obviously a bit of a different story. But I think in some capacity, an NFL team will use his skills on both sides of the ball because he's just that good. So, to why I'm taking him here at number 4, assuming that he is playing wide receiver. What do we know about Travis Hunter? We know that he is an unbelievable athlete. He was one of the highest profile recruits of the last how many ever years. He goes to Jackson State. It causes a ruckus. I mean, he was as advertised. Like, he was that level of an athlete. He was that level of a player on both sides. He went to he follows Dion, goes to the FBS, doesn't miss a beat, actually got way better this year. Like, easily career highs across all receiving numbers for him. 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns this year, 11 of 16 in contested catches, with a 3.2% drop rate overall. Like, literally every single receiving category that you can quantify on a stats page, he got markedly better at and looks like one of the best players at this position in college football, all while being, somebody who's playing full time on the other side of the ball. So I think he's a special sort of talent. And in that case, I can't pass him up here, especially like with that sort of unknown floating over our heads. Like, maybe we're going to have a player here that's putting up stats like every single snap of a game. Like the fantasy potential with a player like Hunter is just, it seems like it's limitless. So, but even just that wide receiver, I'll take him here at number 4.
Yeah, that's the thing is I don't know if, like, as a wide receiver, he should be this high because, I mean, we know what he is and we know what he can do, but I feel like there are other receivers that are, more refined, I guess, and also don't have to go get beat up on the other side of the ball. It's like, it's the damned if you do, damned if you don't, I feel like, because if you do take the chance on him and he does end up playing like corner with some sub wide receiver packages, then you don't feel so great. But if you don't take the risk on him and he's playing wide receiver full time and they have like a Travis package on defense where, he's shadowing a number 1 receiver for 20 plays a game, then it's like, oh man, like that would have been kind of cool to have. So I don't know. If he has DB eligibility in sleeper, you probably got to take him this high.
Everything that we talk about with Hunter right now is everything comes with an asterisk.
Yeah.
Like, there's no possible way to accurately talk about this player without fully understanding what position he will primarily be playing in the NFL. So that's going to make for a lot of interesting conversation for the next several months until we figure that out. But I do want to reiterate before we jump to number 5, even just as a wide receiver, like, let's take corner completely out of it. I think he still has the ability and the talent to go this high. Like, I think he has the talent to be the number 2 wide receiver in this draft class.
I think that is where his ceiling is at. I agree. I think he has the athleticism. He showed the promise this year that he could do it. It's just like like you said, there's a lot of question marks around him, and it's going to be a long draft season with this player because even by April, we probably won't have the true real answers.
Shit's already dramatic enough. Now I got to follow this whole saga along. It's incredible. All right. 105.
105. So far, it's gone Jeanty, McMillan, Omarion Hampton, and Travis Hunter. With the 5th pick, I'm going to stay true to my board, even though I want to stray from it already. And I'm going to take Kaleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa. This is another guy that has shot up the board this season. A player who last year in his sophomore season had 463 yards and 3 touchdowns. Followed that up with 1,535 yards, 21 touchdowns. That's good for 6.4 yards a carry, no fumbles. Kaleb Johnson, literally every single time you watch him, it's impressive. And you, like, at least I'll speak for myself. I watch him and I'm like, man, Kaleb Johnson just does everything right. It feels like every single time he touches the ball, he's getting, 5 yards. And he's a strong runner that can cut on a dime. Seems like he has great vision. Seems like he can do a little bit in the passing game, even though they didn't use him very much on that side of things. And it shows on the stat sheet with, like I said, 6.4 carry, had 100 yards in every single game that he got at least 20 carries. It's like, it was hard to keep moving him down on my board because, like, this is quite a jump for me to move Kaleb Johnson up. He wasn't really in the zeitgeist in this offseason. And then you come into the year and you see him pop a couple off. It's like, oh, Iowa's fun. Their running back's kind of fun. And now it's like, is this, right now he's my number 4 player on my board. Like, is this where we're at? I don't know. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I mean, when we did midseason rankings check-in, I had him at number 10. And I think I said at the time, I don't know if this is even high enough. Like,
right.
It's hard to kind of adjust on the fly when you just spent, all summer watching a bunch of guys, and here comes a new guy, and you're trying to understand who he is before you really get to dive in on his film. But I'm with you. Like, at this point of the season, 10 wasn't high enough for me. Like, I moved him up even today. Like, I have him sitting right at number 6. So we're 1 off on this one. But I mean, it was an unbelievable season, and another player that when you watch him, he's just so easy to love at this position. He does everything that you're looking for a running back. I mean, running with power, running with elusiveness, getting a little bit mixed up in the pass game. That's not something that I would say is as big of a strength as it is for, like, say, an Omarion Hampton or even an Ashton Jeanty. Despite the fact that Jeanty didn't have a ton of work this year, we know what he did last year. We know how involved he can be. Kaleb Johnson, 22 catches, 190 yards in the pass game. Nothing crazy, but you see that he clearly has potential to build off of those numbers. And it, culminated week 14 with a 73-yard performance receiving. So he was continuing to get worked in throughout the season, obviously had an amazing season on the ground. So there's not much left, standing in between this player and being one of the top running backs in this class. And in that case, that's going to land him in the top half of our first round in the Dynasty rookie draft.
Pretty wild how much changes through a year, because we talk about 2026 and almost with like certainty, you got to give those 26 picks away for 27 picks, because we know exactly what 2 years down the road is going to look like too. But there's guys that I mean, Jeanty and Kaleb Johnson, you look at, because we kind of had a feeling with McMillan, we had a feeling with Travis Hunter. But with Jeanty and Kaleb Johnson wasn't really on our radar at all. And Jeanty was, on the radar, but it was more of like a low first kind of thing, a guy doing this thing in the Mountain West. And now it's like both these guys are going top half of your rookie draft. I don't know. It's just wild to see how we got here.
Yeah, and the story with Kaleb Johnson too, the first time we talked about him, and we talked about him a lot during the season this year. There's plenty of opportunities to go, hear us talk about Kaleb Johnson. But the first time we brought him up was kind of like, okay, who is this? He is a player that had a good freshman season in 2022, 777 yards, 6 touchdowns for Iowa. Was like, all right, this is something to build on. And then last year he's hurt and he only has 463 yards, 3 touchdowns. So like the name just kind of disappears. Like all this momentum that he had as a freshman, it just goes away. So it's not even that like this 1,500 yard season kind of comes out of nowhere. It's just the fact that like when you're thinking about the next year's running back group, you're not really thinking too much about that injured Iowa running back that you haven't really seen put it all on film yet. Mm-hmm. Now you saw it. So he, everything about how we got to this point kind of makes sense. And then, when you put him on, when you watch him play, makes even more sense. Like, oh yeah, this is the sort of running back that belongs in this conversation.
Yep.
All right. So 106 then, and we're going to stick with running backs. And I'm taking Quinshon Judkins. This is one where I think this season was a little strange, but it wasn't unexpected strange. And I think that's the important part. Like, I think there's a natural reaction to Quinshon's season when we're talking about the 3 running backs that have already been drafted ahead of him with Jeanty, Omarion Hampton, and Kaleb Johnson. 3 players that all had 1,500 plus rushing yards. Jeanty, of course, astronomical numbers, and then the other 2 just very, very good. Judkins had 805 yards rushing this year and 8 touchdowns. But he did that on 146 carries. I mean, Jeanty had 345 carries. Hampton had 281. And Kaleb Johnson had 240. So this is the whole, we talk about it a lot. Like, let's not look at the box score to figure out who are the best players in a draft class, because we understood when Quinshon transferred to Ohio State and TreVeyon returned that this is what the backfield was going to look like. And I still think, based on what I saw from Quinshon this year, he's still the player that was exciting to us coming off of 2 amazing seasons at Ole Miss. Like the player that got us fired up 2 years ago, watching him putting up his own 1,500 yard rushing season as a true freshman in the SEC.
Yep.
That player is still here today. It's just that he was not afforded the opportunity to have one more season like that, given the nature of Ohio State. But I still love this player. I still think all the things I thought about him coming into the year. You can go, listen to us gush about him in the summer, and I'm still taking him here at number 6.
Yeah, I have Judkins also quite high because I was like, I have him at number 6. There we go. He's a player that we said in the offseason that we've been championing all year. Like you said, this was going to be a suppressed statistical season for him. He's splitting carries with another really good back in a team that has a lot of mouths to feed. And that's what the final total ends up looking like. And if you are a box score watcher and you're like, you had 800 yards off my board, like, that's fine. That's cool. Let him slide down the board then. Because like we know exactly who this player can be and what he can do and the talent that he has. And I didn't love how Ohio State even used him in the times when they did bring him in, but maybe we'll see, a signature moment in the playoffs or two, and it'll become, his name will become a little more prevalent. But I feel like this is a player that just isn't getting talked about very much for the type of cachet that he already has. So I don't know. Well, we'll see where he ends up in the grand scheme of things. I think that this is where he should be. And I don't know if everybody will end up agreeing with that, but I feel pretty good about having him, right here at number 6.
It's insane how little you've heard this name.
Yeah.
Like nobody's talking about Quinshon anymore. So what does that mean? Is it just because we got shiny new toys with these running backs that are ahead of him, which I have, 2 of those players ahead of him today. Like I have, I had Hampton in front of him in the summer already. Obviously have Jeanty in front of him. Kaleb Johnson, I have Quinshon 5th and Johnson 6th. So they're sitting right beside each other right now. That could flip-flop when we, dive deeper into 2024 in a couple weeks. Like, it's not to say that, we're all forgetting about him. Like, we shouldn't let these guys pass him by. Like, I think there were legitimate areas of, areas of improvement in Quinshon's game coming into this year. Like, he was not an infallible prospect, despite what we and many other people thought after seeing his freshman season. Like, he did lose a little bit of that momentum. I thought coming into this season even, but again, like the fact that nobody is even talking about him really is just like kind of insane to me. Yeah. And the note about usage also, I do think is very important because we talked about it in the summer. Why did his stats regress last year at Ole Miss? Part of it could have something to do with a pretty dramatic shift in how they were using him in terms of zone and gap scheme running, because his freshman season, he had a very significantly higher zone running percentage. And he is a running back that's made for zone running. That number became a dead even 50-50 split in 2023. And you saw his numbers dip a little bit. How did they use him at Ohio State? 76 gap scheme runs to 70 zone runs. So like we have this amazing zone runner that we've been running, in a power run scheme for 2 years. And maybe he's just not being like put into the best position for his skill set to succeed. I mean, that's when you look at how the percentage 168 to 106 in favor of zone his freshman season, and he has 1,500 yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, it's kind of crazy that they've, for 2 years, 2 different programs shifted him away from that. But
yeah, I mean, you can't change your scheme for a player,
right?
But like at the same time, when you have a player like this, as football guys, we want to see players in the best position to succeed. And when they're not, it's like, I wish you were doing it the way I want it to be. But like Ohio State's not going to change their whole philosophy to fit Judkins when they also have Henderson, who succeeds in the way that they're doing it. So alas, hopefully he ends up in a place that works for him, because that tends to be how the NFL goes.
All right. 107.
Luther Burden will stop the slide.
There it is.
Maybe. So Luther Burden was in conversation before the year as like maybe the wide receiver 1 of this class, after having 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns his sophomore year at Mizzou. This year puts up 676 and 6 touchdowns. We've talked a little bit about regressing offenses as we've done this show, and as a result, the players doing a little bit worse. And this is another, victim of quarterback performance issues, I guess you could say. Brady Cook last year, Mizzou's quarterback, had 3,317 yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions on 66% completion. This year, down to 63% completions, 2,248 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Burden has 6 of those receiving touchdowns. So, yes, it wasn't the season we wanted to see. We had some lofty expectations for Burden, but I feel like making do with what you got is the story for this player this year. We know him as the yards after catch guy in this class. He still had about a third of his yards after the catch with 373, 6 yards after catch per reception. He's still at that 2.32 yards per route run. I'd love it to be a little higher, but it's not a bad mark to be at. So Burden didn't have the full breakout year that we wanted him to statistically, but I feel like he played well in context of this Missouri offense, and it just didn't end up ballooning him into big statistical performances.
Yeah, I mentioned it not too long ago, but this will be one of the players that I run to first to see what happened this year. Like, what does the 2024 film tell us about Luther Burden? Because it is so dramatic of a departure from what we saw last year. And you mentioned it. I mean, another case of an offense getting worse. Missouri was one of the best teams in the country last year. But to see, how far he fell this year, and just like it seemed like the usage was just different from what I was watching as well. Like, I want to understand what happened to get us to this point, because I don't think this is a bad player. Like, I don't think this year is like an indicator like, oh man, he's fool's gold and we got a little ahead of ourselves after the 1,200 yard season. Like, I don't think that's what this means, but I do think there is a world where, people, you might find someone that's arguing for Luther Burden today as like the number 3 pick in this class. Mm-hmm. Like, that could still be a thing, and it wouldn't be crazy to do that. But like, you and I are in agreement that we're not comfortable with that anymore, at least not until we really dive in and maybe you get to his film and he's open all the time and he's just not getting the ball. And so it's like, okay, well, whatever. But I did have questions coming into this season about how he was used even last year. Mm-hmm. And, sort of the nature of his game as a wide receiver, as a player that was, unfathomably good after the catch, 8.4 yards after the catch per reception, highlight after highlight from Burden after the catch last year. But was he doing enough to be a consistent, wide receiver? Was he consistently running routes that he's going to need to run in the NFL to be a consistent contributor in an NFL offense? I didn't see enough of that last year to feel like super confident, like he's a slam dunk, no doubt. But it spoke to his talent that I still ranked him very highly, because you just don't find players with his skills after the catch very often. So
yeah, I feel like Burden didn't get enough credit for his route running going into the season. And like, it didn't seem, from what I've seen so far, didn't seem like it changed a whole lot. And like, I would have liked to see a big change in his route running, and we see the yards after the catch and like the ability after the catch is still what it was. But like you said, it'll be interesting to deep dive and see exactly what went wrong for him on a down-to-down basis, or what went wrong for the offense as a whole on a down-to-down basis, because just not seeing the reflection of what we thought we'd see at the beginning of the year.
108. Man. This is, I don't know if I want to call it a tier break. I don't think so. I think I'd probably lump this player into the same tier. But I'm going to take the other one. I'm going to take TreVeyon Henderson. Like, I know it seems ridiculous on the surface that like two running backs from the same backfield are both going top 8 in a dynasty rookie draft, but that is, that's just what happened. Like when Quinshon transferred there and TreVeyon stayed, this is just what happened. Like,
yep.
And TreVeyon this year, I thought had a great season. Like, again, not on the numbers side. He's not going to be contending because you put these two together, it's over 1,500 yards rushing. TreVeyon had 745 yards, 6 touchdowns on 109 carries. So 6.8 yards per carry from TreVeyon this year. That was his highest number since that, famous freshman year when he was, the new guy, when he was the new prize. Like, look out for 2023. It's TreVeyon Henderson's year. And then, obviously that all changed and we still thought he'd be in the class last year, but here we are. And he's still a top 8 pick even now, because I thought, we talked about it a lot. It's no surprise if you listened to us last year, he was probably going to be our RB1 last year. Like he was, he had gotten to a point by the end of last season that it was like, all right, I don't know that another running back in this class has what he has. He went back and he didn't miss a step. He actually, I think, got better this year. So I still think he's one of the best backs in this class, even though he's playing a 1B role for this Ohio State team. Doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, this was like the same story as Judkins, I would say. Judkins, we had high expectations for in a limited role. TreVeyon, it was almost waiting to see if he was going to be right, because there was a stretch last year where we were touting him as, potentially the RB1 of the class, and he was in and out of that Ohio State lineup with injuries. And this year it was like, can we see a fully healthy TreVeyon Henderson because he's on limited snaps, or can we see a fully healthy TreVeyon Henderson and he's on limited snaps, whichever one it really is. And he looked just as good as he had his freshman and then the back half of his 2023 season. So you see him build on that. Again, the box score watchers are going to be like, hasn't cracked 1,000 yards since his freshman year. This guy stinks. And like, that's fine. Again, whatever. But TreVeyon looks like a real player, and he, performs like a high level running back that can, the way he makes people miss in the open field, and the player that he is as a pass catcher, and the pass blocking that he does, protecting the quarterback, all makes him a very desirable player. Now, how are people going to feel about him? How are NFL teams going to feel about him as a, quote unquote, older running back prospect that has had a checkered injury history, that, didn't have a ton of statistical acumen? We'll see. But right now I feel pretty good about TreVeyon.
Yeah, despite the fact that he is a senior, he will be 22 and a half when he is drafted. So older, certainly.
Just a kid, though.
But, 22 years old, like...
Yeah.
That's only 5 months older than Omarion Hampton. So, yeah. I'm excited, man. That, like, how many running backs we got now? Like 6? Yeah. No, 5. 5 running backs in the top 8 picks.
Let's make it 6 in the top 9. How about that? Devin Neal.
Oh!
So Devin Neal is my number 7 player, my RB5. Another player that went back when we weren't quite sure if he would. He was my RB1 at one point last year. Had 1,280 yards his junior season, had 1,000 yards his sophomore season, and then his senior season goes back to break all the Kansas records and etch his name in Jayhawks lore forever. And he absolutely did that. Another 1,250, 16 touchdowns this year on 5.8 a carry. Start getting him involved in the pass game a little bit. Would love to see that more. I feel like Devin Neal could be unlocked as a real pass catcher. This is a guy that gets outside of the line of scrimmage and can just, do some filthy things to defensive backs, linebackers, whoever's in the way. Good outside zone guy, can get it done between the tackles. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Devin Neal, and luckily backed up his junior year performance with another great season, another healthy season for him in his senior year, and taking him here at 9.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Devin Neal now for 2 years, and I think based off of his entire body of work, but also the season that he caps his college career with, he's absolutely deserving to be in this sort of conversation amongst the top backs in the class. You talk about RB6 and we're sitting here at 109, and this is a great year to need a running back.
Yeah.
If that wasn't clear, because there's more.
Yeah,
we're not done. So but yeah, another incredible season for Devin Neal. Love the elusiveness. Mention that when we talk about him. What traits do you have that set you apart? And I think Devin Neal's ability to make tacklers miss, change direction in the open field, is something that not many backs in this class can do as well or better than Devin Neal.
Yeah, he had 814 yards after contact, and he scored a touchdown in every single game but 2, and in every game since week 4. So this is a guy that also has a nose for the end zone. He can be used in short yardage stuff. He's 5'11", 215, 220. So he's not like a small back. He can still, get it done. And I think that's another thing where it's I like him as an outside guy, but I think he's a little bit underrated as a guy that can do it between the tackles every once in a while.
This is not my second comp of the show, and I have said this before, so it's not new information. I get Kendre Miller vibes from Devin Neal. And that, in the year of our Lord 2024, that might feel like an insult, but let's remember that Kendre was on the field this week, and it didn't look too bad. Scored a cool touchdown.
If he didn't, create a blood feud with Dennis Allen, then maybe he'd be seeing the field a little more. But apparently, Dennis Allen just hated his guts, and you got to do what you got to do.
Absolutely wild.
Make friends. Make friends with your head coach. That's my.
Rizzy coming out and confirming the report that he did not need to be on IR.
Yeah.
He's like, he was healthy enough 3 weeks ago, but
Dennis Allen just didn't like him.
Oh, it's crazy. All right. 110. God, I love this class, man, because I'm sitting here at 110.
Yep.
And I'm taking Emeka Egbuka.
Damn right you are.
My Lord. And this is what happens when we have so many good running backs, and we know how important running backs are in Dynasty and fantasy football in general. So then we let a guy like this kind of slip through the cracks while we're pulling the backs that we like. And now here he is, one of the most talented wide receivers, of the last couple of years. Honestly, this was a player that, going back to last season, was coming into the year as our number 2 wide receiver. We see the ascendance of Rome and Malik over the course of the season. Egbuka was still probably wide receiver 4 for me in last year's class before he decided, I'm going to go back because It was an injury riddled season for him. He did not have the kind of year that he, would have hoped for coming off of an 1,100 yard season with 10 touchdowns. This year, I mean, it wasn't super sexy. It wasn't another 1,000+ yard season, but I think with the emergence of Jeremiah Smith and this two-headed running attack kind of being this, classic presence for them in the slot, 743 yards and 9 touchdowns for Emeka Egbuka. Kind of just very on brand, like a quiet season. This is going to be the player that's constantly getting labeled low ceiling, high floor. That's what we're talking about here, but I don't even buy that. And I've said this many times, I don't think he's a low ceiling player. I think he's incredibly technically sound. I think he's going to live in the slot, 80% this season. I think that's kind of indicative of what to expect from him in the NFL, but that does not have to mean that he is just, second fiddle in an offense. I think this is the sort of player that you can have as a featured, focal point of your passing attack, probably with another receiver, alongside of him on the outside, but that's fine because we see that all over the league these days. So think about a situation like his former teammate is in right now, DK Metcalf, JSN, who is Emeka's DK in the NFL. So that's right. That's my piece.
I feel like we have started to accept it a little bit, but there was a time where when a receiver went to a team that already had an established receiver, it was like doom and gloom. It was like, oh man, I can't believe, Jerry Jeudy went to the Broncos, who already have Cortland Sutton. Now both of them, their careers are over. But now you can kind of fit these guys into roles where Egbuka absolutely feels like a bridesmaid kind of guy, where he's going to sit across from, one of these number one guys and excel year in and year out. You see across the league, there's guys like this. And I feel like you had Marvin Harrison last year. You had, the whole crew a couple of years ago. And then you have Jeremiah Smith come in and look like a superstar his freshman year. And Egbuka just steadily churning out good seasons and good games. Exclude 2023 potentially because of the injuries. But like, even when he was playing, he looked pretty solid with bad quarterback play. So you want to see this player come in and play on a team that has a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, that's going to throw the ball around the yard a little bit. But regardless, it's a guy that gets open and gets you tough yards and blocks out of the slot. He's a pretty big slot player at 6'1", 205. You normally see these guys, 5'10", quick, whatever. Egbuka gets in and out of his routes. He's bigger and he uses his frame over the middle. He's not afraid of that contact over the middle. So I really like Egbuka, and I'm keeping an eye on landing spot a little bit because you're going to need volume to prop this guy up, because I do think he's a little bit of a 2, but I think he's a high ceiling 2.
Where it'd be awesome, and it doesn't make any sense because the room is, well, it maybe it makes kind of sense. Houston.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like it's obviously there's a lot of names there now, but Diggs maybe kind of, well, not in coming off of an injury. Tank Dell.
He's only on a 1-year deal anyway.
So I mean, I kind of like the Nico Egbuka connection, and then we get the Stroud Egbuka. I mean, there's all sorts of it makes so much sense.
It makes
now we're gonna rewind this like 7 months from now when it happens.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, we called that.
All right. 2 picks to go. Your last pick of this mock draft, 111.
Gotta make it count. Do I just stick with my guys? Is that what I do here?
I think that's what you do.
Well, I'm taking Tre Harris then. I have him number 11 on my board right now. And had a season cut short, but it's his 5th season at Ole Miss. And he looked incredible in every single game in the first half of the season. And I just like the combination of size and speed and catch point and yards after the catch, it all, brought itself together to a player that I really grew to like. If you look at what he did in 2023 with 986 yards, 8 touchdowns, it looked really good. He did that in 7 games essentially in 2024. He had 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was obviously and easily the go-to guy for this offense in the passing game, and he delivered down in and down out. The model of consistency that can mix in a big play threat for a team, a guy that could be an alpha receiver but struggles a little bit with pure separation.
Yeah, incredibly unfortunate for Tre Harris. I mean, talking about him coming into the year and then to see what he was doing to start this season, I mean, it's a damn shame that we didn't get to see him, put a full season's body of work on the page this year, because to have 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns in a season that was shortened a bit, it's unbelievable. So I'm another player that I'm curious to jump into his film because of the reasons that you just said, which was coming into the year, I liked him. I liked him a lot because of his ability at the catch point. I thought he was a better route runner than he was maybe given credit for. But that being said, some athletic limitations that were preventing him from, truly excelling at X wide receiver, which is where he was playing, where it's, kind of where his game fits best, but separating vertically, separating against man coverage consistently, those were areas where I thought he needed to take a big step forward to be, the sort of player that was worthy of being in this conversation. And then when you saw what he was doing earlier this year, you saw him winning deep consistently, like over and over again, taking the top off of defenses. It was like, hold on a second, like what happened here? So I'm incredibly excited to watch, the games that we did get from Tre Harris this season, and find out if he was a player that did take that step, a 5th-year player, but one that, might just have gotten even better.
Yeah. And then, so gets injured and then comes back against Florida, catches a 43-yard touchdown, and then re-injures the groin. And it's like, oh man. So probably saw the last of Tre Harris that we're going to see this season, but probably not participating in the Egg Bowl. But
I think he's going to have to rush back. He's trying to get in that one.
We'll see him draft night.
All right. One last pick to make then. 112. I'm looking at who's on top of my board, and then I'm looking at some of the names behind that player, and I'm like, well, that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of fun.
Like for the content, just be like, I kind of want to talk about him.
We can hit some of those names, I guess, after. Or maybe not. I'm talking myself into it. Screw it. 112. I'm taking Tyler Warren.
Ooh.
Tight end, Penn State.
Hell yeah.
I love Colston Loveland. I do. I think Loveland and Warren are right next to each other and should be both considered as potential first round dynasty rookie players. Like, that's how good these guys are at tight end. I'm going with Warren because Warren has the additional size and does not lose much in terms of fluidity as a runner and as a route runner and as a player after the catch. So when you see a tight end like this that is a pure weapon, I I talked myself into that. Like, I know we can get on a whole soapbox about tight ends in fantasy, and especially after a year like this, man, where it was really, really bad. It was really, really bad.
Yeah.
But
except for the one rookie.
Except for the one rookie. So, like, you have George Kittle, and then you have the next George Kittle, as coined by you, Brock Bowers.
Oh, what about Trey McBride?
Well, and Trey McBride, but Kittle and Bowers were
but yes, you're right.
I mean, if McBride had caught like 3 touchdowns, he'd be a singular touchdown. He'd probably be in that conversation. But those 3 are really the only tight ends of any like sort of note. I mean, if you got in on like Jonnu Smith over the last 4 weeks, like
David
maybe
Njoku with Jameis.
Like there's bits outside of that, but like consistently for an entire season, it was 3 guys. So, and every year we're going to do this. Every year we're going to be like, tight end doesn't matter at all. And then Brock Bowers comes in and he's like, okay, yeah, maybe tight end matters a little bit.
Yeah.
Not saying Warren is Brock Bowers, but like, Nobody
will be Brock Bowers.
Exactly. Nobody's Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers did what he did because of who he is. But I am not going to just I'm not going to turn away from tight ends. Like, for better or for worse, it's maybe a fatal flaw of mine. I will not turn away from tight ends when we know how big of an impact they can make when they are producing. When in the game of fantasy, if you have a tight end that is consistently producing like a George Kittle or like a Brock Bowers, that is such a major advantage for you on a week-to-week basis. I mean, we saw it for years with Kelsey, how big of an impact Kelsey made for all sorts of fantasy teams. I'm going to bet on players like Tyler Warren that I think are round 1 NFL tight ends that have incredible skills as a route runner at this size and as a player that can create yards after the catch at this size. So let's have some fun going Warren.
I have Warren at 14. So like, he's right there for me. And he's my tight end 1 also. I have him, Fannin also in this conversation, Colson, Loveland, like you mentioned. Tyler Warren has the full package, I think, for a tight end prospect, where he is a physical player and he can get it done at the line of scrimmage. They have him doing all kinds of stuff on their offense. You can tell he's a very intelligent player. He understands the ins and outs of this Penn State offense, and you would expect him to do the same in the league. He's a strong runner with the football. He's strong at the catch point. My number 1 key for tight ends, as you know, as the listeners know, I need you to be able to break the first tackle, because that's the only way that you can be an effective fantasy tight end. So I believe in Tyler Warren. I think that this is a sound pick by you. Maybe, 10% irresponsible. Yeah. But, talk about the tight ends a little bit on the show. And, if that's your style, go after one of those guys.
If nothing else, just to highlight how talented this tight end group is. Like, we haven't talked a ton about these guys. Like, we talked about Fannin a lot. We've talked about Loveland in the summer. We've gotten Warren in the conversation lately. But like, this is an incredible tight end group. Maybe they're not going to be round 1 players in Dynasty, but they're going to be littered in the second round. Very similar to like Michael Mayer, Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave, like that whole stretch of guys where it was like, once we got into the second, and Kincaid was a first round Dynasty pick for a lot of people that year as well. So like, you had one guy kind of championing the class, and then you had a bunch of guys in the second round. And that is, I think, what's going to happen with this class too. So I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that, and that, the best one, which we are in agreement now, is Tyler Warren. And we'll know even more about that in a few weeks when we break tight ends down. But yeah, I mean, a player that, if nothing else, deserves a shout out here.
Yep.
And there it is, man. One round.
It's beautiful.
Pack it up. We did it. It's over.
All right. See you guys next year for 2026.
Oh man, the fun is only just beginning here. Incredible stuff. Love looking at this class this way after, months and months of, following these guys through the college football season, new names emerging, guys like Kaleb Johnson, like Tyler Warren that were not really on the radar in the summertime. And now here we are, their first round picks in our first mock draft coming out of the season. So that's exciting. Mm-hmm. And it makes me even more excited for what's coming next with Rankings 2.0. That is a very pivotal moment. I know I keep talking about it, but it is a very pivotal moment for us and the people too. I mean, this is our big moment to kind of put all of our opinions out there, get really deep into this class and really start to unpack it. And then that's going to carry us through the rest of draft season. So it's an incredibly exciting time for us at Camp Dynasty.
To recap, we had 101 Ashton Jeanty, McMillan was 2, and then Omarion Hampton, Travis Hunter, Kaleb Johnson, Quinshon Judkins, Luther Burden, TreVeyon Henderson, Devin Neal, Emeka Egbuka, Tre Harris, and Tyler Warren. Those are guys that you will be hearing their names in rankings coming up. You will be hearing their names all throughout the offseason. You can stick with us if you want to hear more names because, this next time we do this, we're going 2 rounds. We're getting deep. We'll be getting into sleepers. I mean, you won't just be hearing these guys' names recycled over and over again. But rankings, like you said, that's where the real grind and the fun begins of this offseason as tape becomes more available and you can kind of dig in on a full season's worth of information from these guys.
Absolutely. This is only the tip of the iceberg for the 2025 rookie class, and we will be, diving way deeper over the next few months. So if you enjoyed I guess you could call it way too early. I think we decided that the summer version is the way too early. Yeah. So this is just the way too early.
Way too early. Yeah.
Our mock 2.0. Be sure to find us on Twitter at Camp_Dynasty and TikTok at Camp.Dynasty. And if you are listening on the pod feed, head over to YouTube and subscribe there because video feeds of the pods do go up every week. And also rate, review, subscribe, share, and follow the pod feed as well because we very much appreciate that.
Getting more subscribers on YouTube. That's awesome. Keep subscribing up to 125 now. I mean, hey, keep them coming in. We'll keep pushing the videos out.
Yeah. Shout out a great year for the pod. Tweeted it out. Spotify rep came out. Thanks to everybody who checked us out this year. I mean, it was a great year. And, we do this for the love of the game, man. Like we're just here because we love doing it. It's cool to see that people want to, join along and follow us along with these rookie classes. So really appreciate that. And anything you can do to support the show, subscribing, liking, rating, any of that.
It's all free.
It's all free. And and it means the world to us. So there's my pitch.
Damn right.
We'll be back next week. Rankings 2.0 will officially begin with the quarterback position, the much discussed.
I'm really excited for it.
2025 quarterback class. We will get very, very deep into it. Maybe some exciting stuff. I don't know. Drew Aller, my number 5 coming into the year. Maybe he's number 1 after all. We're going to find out next week. But thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.